What if the United States never entered World War I? The Great War began in 1914 and dragged Europe into chaos. Millions of lives were lost, empires collapsed. By 1917, the war seemed endless. That was when the U.S. intervened, tipping the balance with fresh troops, supplies, and money. America's entry not only decided the war, but also launched the United States onto the world stage as a global superpower. But let's imagine a different timeline. What if America stayed neutral, never sending its soldiers over there, never financing the Allies, never declaring war on Germany? Would the Allies have survived, or would Germany have won the First World War? In this episode of What If History, we'll explore how the war could have unfolded without U.S. involvement, the fate of Europe, and the long-term consequences for the 20th century. But first, a quick note. This is a complex topic, and history is rarely simple. Our goal is not absolute accuracy, but rather to entertain and educate. If you love this kind of content, please subscribe and leave your feedback in the comments. Let's begin. In the real timeline, the U.S. entered the war in April 1917 after years of neutrality. The reasons: unrestricted German submarine warfare that sank American ships, and the infamous Zimmermann telegram, where Germany promised Mexico land if it attacked the U.S. Once America declared war, the impact was massive. By 1918, nearly 2 million American soldiers were in Europe. They were fresh, well-supplied, and full of morale, contrasting with the exhausted armies of France and Britain. American money and supplies kept the Allied economies alive. American troops fought crucial battles like Cantigny, Belleau-Wood, and the Meuse-Argonne offensive. By late 1918, Germany realized it could not win against this flood of manpower and resources. The Kaiser abdicated, and the war ended with the armistice on November 11, 1918. In short, U.S. intervention broke the stalemate, ensured Allied victory. Without America, things might have gone very differently. Now, let's imagine America never joins. President Woodrow Wilson keeps the nation neutral despite German provocations. No declaration of war, no doughboys crossing the Atlantic. America continues to trade with both sides but never becomes the arsenal of democracy. What changes? No flood of U.S. troops in 1918. France and Britain must fight with what's left of their exhausted armies. No massive loans to the Allies. Britain and France would run dangerously low on funds to keep fighting. No morale boost. The knowledge that America was on its way gave the Allies hope. Without it, despair might spread. Meanwhile, Germany faces fewer enemies. Although starving at home due to the British blockade, Germany could gamble on one final offensive in 1918, this time against a much weaker Allied line. The war might end not in Allied victory, but in exhaustion, stalemate, or even German dominance. So, would Germany actually win? By 1917, Russia had collapsed. The Bolshevik Revolution pulled Russia out of the war, freeing German troops to shift westward. In our timeline, those divisions arrived just as American forces did. But in this alternate scenario, the Germans faced no Americans, only battered French and British troops. The spring offensive of 1918 becomes critical. In reality, the Germans advanced 60 kilometers but failed to break through, partly because the Allies knew American reinforcements were coming. Without that reassurance, France and Britain might have panicked, perhaps even sued for peace. Germany's goal was not to conquer all of Europe, but to force a favorable peace, controlling Eastern Europe, keeping Belgium, maybe even dominating France economically. Without the U.S., this outcome looks far more plausible. So yes, Germany could very well have won, or at least forced a negotiated peace on its terms. The war might have ended in 1918, not with Allied victory, but with German triumph. And what about the Allies? Britain. The Royal Navy still dominated the seas, but the army was exhausted. Casualties were in the millions. Without American credit and food shipments, Britain's economy might collapse. Social unrest and war weariness would grow. France. By 1917, France had suffered devastating mutinies. Morale was fragile. The knowledge that America was on its way kept them in the fight. Without that hope, France might have been forced into negotiations. Both countries relied heavily on U.S. wheat, coal, oil, and loans. Without these, it's hard to imagine Britain and France holding out through 1918. Thus, even if Germany did not win outright, the Allies might have lost the will or the means to continue. In the East, Russia's collapse is key. The Bolsheviks seized power in 1917 and signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918, ceding huge amounts of land to Germany. With the U.S. absent, this treaty would still hold. Germany would dominate Eastern Europe, controlling Ukraine, the Baltics, and parts of Poland. In our timeline, German defeat nullified Brest-Litovsk. But Germany keeps its Eastern Empire. The map of Europe shifts dramatically, with Berlin at the center. This would make Germany not just the strongest power in Western Europe, but also the master of the East. So what happens to the United States? Without war, America avoids massive mobilization. The military stays small. The economy doesn't boom from wartime production. American soldiers never experience combat in Europe. Politically, the U.S. remains isolationist. Wilson never earns a seat at the peace table, meaning no Wilsonian world order, no League of Nations led by America. The USWOULD remain a regional power, strong but inward-looking. Economically, the 1920s might not roar in the same way. Many industries, steel, chemicals, aviation grew because of war contracts. Without that stimulus, America's rise as an industrial superpower would slow. Culturally, America would not gain the prestige it did after 1918. Instead of being seen as the savior of Europe, it would be viewed as a bystander. In short, No American century. Here's the biggest twist. If America stays neutral, there may be no Versailles Treaty and perhaps no Hitler. In reality, the harsh Versailles terms humiliated Germany, fueling resentment and economic chaos. This anger gave Hitler his chance. But in this alternate scenario, Germany wins or negotiates a favorable peace. There's no crushing reparations, no national humiliation. Without this environment, extremist movements in Germany, especially the Nazis, may never rise. That means no Hitler, no Nazi regime, no Holocaust, no World War II as we know it. Of course, this doesn't mean a peaceful century. Instead of WWII, the world might face ongoing rivalries, a German-dominated Europe clashing with Britain, a resurgent Russia, or an isolated America. But it would be a very different 20th century. So what does the 20th century look like in this timeline? Europe, dominated by Germany, with Mitteleuropa stretching from Belgium to Ukraine. Colonies, Britain and France weaken. Germany ascendant colonial rivalries continue longer. US, a strong but regional power, not the global leader. Technology, without WWII, things like radar, jets, nuclear weapons, and computers develop more slowly. Global conflicts, instead of a US Soviet Cold War, we might see a German-British rivalry dominating the century. This is a slower, less American, more German-dominated world. We started this journey by asking, how would the world change if the United States had stayed neutral in World War I? The answer, profoundly. America's intervention not only reshaped the 20th century, but also launched the United States onto the world stage as a major power. Without its participation, Europe's map might look very different today. So what do you think? Would the world be better or worse if the US had stayed neutral in World War I? Share your thoughts in the comments. As we wrap up this episode, we want to extend a special thanks to our supporters whose names you can see on the screen right now. Their support helps us create engaging and informative content on historical topics. If you enjoy our work and would like to support us, please consider joining our membership program. Your support will help us continue to produce high-quality historical content. Thanks for watching.